Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy with the Chance of Meeples. Today, we dive into the world of Sweetwater Grove, a land in which bees have figured out economics. Yes, you heard that right. Today, we're checking out the game from Elf Creek Games. It plays 1 to 4 players. It's a worker bee placement game. Today, we look at Honeybuzz. Cue the thunder. So the radar overview for Honeybuzz looks something like this. A game all about bees, all about honey. It's a worker placement game, and the components in this one are absolutely top notch. I know many people look at these components and showcase the components because they are that good. Specifically these, okay? Check out this. These are the honey components in the game, and they look like candies. They're a little squishy. They absolutely are amazing. They look great. And it doesn't stop there. These tiles, they are like thick cardboard. You have these beeples. Yes, I said beeples because that's what they are. Okay, they come in 4 different colors. You have yellow and pink and blue and green, right? Yellow, pink, blue, green. Yes. Okay, so just everything about this game. Components looks amazing. Artwork amazing. Is the game amazing? Let's check it out. This is the game in which you will be placing bees, collecting tiles to make empty cells in your hive. You'll then be filling those empty cells with nectar through the forage action, and then you'll be producing honey, and that honey will then be brought to the market to sell for just straight victory points. Well, here as well, but you can just sell it if you can't fill one of these objectives, or if you do any of these objectives, you gain the victory points as well as an additional action. So how do you do this? Let me explain. There are 6 different actions that you can trigger when you fill an empty cell or when you create an empty cell. And let me go through them. They have these fantastic little player boards. Not player boards, just reference boards, and they're not paper, they're thick cardboard as well, and it shows each of the 6 different actions that you can do when you complete an empty cell or create an empty cell. Let me start in the top left corner. This one is you create a baby bee. Okay, let's go down here. This is a decree, which acts as a wild. This one, just 5 victory points. This is your forage, which helps you collect nectar. This little fan helps you produce or lets you produce. And then to go to the market, you have this tile. How exactly does this work? Well, on a player's turn, they will be placing a bee. You start with 1 bee. These here, I just have the reserve for the yellow player, which would end up in the nursery, and then you'd pull them back when you recall your workers. But on your turn, you place a worker. So if I put the worker, let's say right here, I would then gain that tile. I then immediately take this tile and I add it to my hive. You can add it anywhere you want. So I could put it here, I could put it here, I could put it here, but let's say I put it here. As soon as you fill or create an empty cell, you trigger all the actions. You can only ever activate each action once unless you have this decree, which is a wild, which lets you do something twice, but you would then activate and trigger all of these. So this one creates a baby bee. I then take this baby bee, I put it up in the nursery, and whenever I recall my workers, I would then take it back. Okay, let's go back down here. And then I would forage. And again, you can do these actions in any order. Foraging. What does that look like? You then take, and I take this little guy. They start on the edge here. But you take this guy and you move in this little pattern here, this little grid. So the first one is free. The second one, or each individual action, every time you move after that, it costs you 2 victory points. And you can only move orthogonally, so up, down, left, right. But this would be free. Let's say I moved here. Why would I pick this? Well, this empty cell matches this type of honey. Okay, so this is the cherry blossom. I can put it in here much like that because as you see, It's got red on the top and the bottom, and the sides are like that beige color. And on the other side of this player board, it actually has all this referencing. So as you can see, I created a cell that looked like that. So then I fill it with nectar. So I've done the baby bee, I've done the foraging. Let's do the produce action. That's this little fan. When you put your fan out, you can put it on any tile, and every adjacent nectar that does not have a honey on it then produces a honey. So if I put it here, I would then produce one of these cherry blossom honeys. I'd put it on there, I'd immediately take off my fan, and then I could do this action. And this is, again, a wild. So I could, let's just say I go to the market. I don't obviously have enough stuff to fill any of these orders, but I could then just sell one cherry blossom right over here, 6 victory points. I take those, and then I would then drop that stock down one, and now all the cherry blossoms, if you sell just straight honey, is worth 5 victory points. So as you can see, it's kind of a little bit of a puzzle as you go through creating your hive and which tiles you're going to take and how are you going to place them and whatnot. I will say this, as you put out workers, and every time you recall your workers, you take all your workers back, including any of the new ones. At that point, you scout. So you go over to the forage area, and this kind of just sets yourself up for further turns. You can just move one space. You don't collect anything. You just move one space. Let's say back to that forage action, if you go to a space that you don't have a matching empty cell, then you get pollen. You just take one of these, so you're not wasting an action taking this forage action if you can't take a tile, a nectar tile. And then that works the same as selling any of the honeys. You can just sell any amount at a time, and then this just moves down regardless of how many. Let's skip ahead and say further along in the game, my hive looks like this, just for example's sakes. Okay, let's say later along in the game, I filled both of these with cherry blossom nectar, and I was able to fan, because if I would fan here, every adjacent one would then activate. So the most you can ever produce in a single action is 3, and again, you can only ever have 1 honey per nectar tile. But let's just say I had this, and I went to the market. Okay, I used this action, I went to the market. I could then sell my 2 cherry blossom. I would return these to the general supply, and then I would trigger whatever action is showing here. So this is showing I get a free forage action. So at that point, then I can move my little worker bee again, or my scout bee, just as much as I wanted. And if I can collect that honey or collect that nectar tile, I can put it in my hive. If not, I just take another pollen. So you continually go around the table collecting tiles. Anytime you put a worker out, say I was yellow and I wanted to go back there, because I could go and collect that tile again. If I do that, you always have to make a beeline. So you always have to put one more than the previous line there. And again, you can continue going to the same one as long as you are able to put one more bee than the previous player, including yourself. I'll also mention this. This is the setup for the 2-player game. So this spot is a little different. In the 3 and 4-player game, this is actually 2 different sections, 2 different places to go. But in the 1 and 2-player, because there is a solo variant, this is considered one whole area. And if you take the decree, it says you pay 5 victory points. So I'll mention that. You continually go around the table until one of 2 things happens. 4 out of the 5 of these are at the bottom, or 2 out of the 3 stacks of orders are exhausted. At that point, you would add final scoring. You add up all your orders, any of these pollen or honey that you have left in your hive count as 1 victory point each. You count all your money, and then you also look at the Queen's Contest. So each game, these will be a little different, and there are kind of 3 different types. You have the purple ones, the orange ones, and the pink ones, and some of them are speed. So in this one, speed, as noted with these 2 flags, the first player to have 3 nectar of any one type in their hive will get 20 victory points. In a 2-player game, or in a 3-player game, 4-player game, whatever, the last player never gains anything. So in a 2-player game, first player will get 20, second player, they wouldn't gain anything. So there's that type of event, speed events. These are the Queen's Contest. And then there's Endgame Scoring. So at this one, the player with the fewest workers gets 20 victory points. And this one, most nectar, not most honey, but most nectar. These tiles in their hive will gain the 20 victory points. And so those are given out at the end of the game. And then you add up your score. Whoever has the most is the winner. And that is how you play Honey Buzz. Checking out now the final forecast. So that's the radar overview for Honey Buzz, an absolutely stunning looking game. Elf Creek Games really did a fantastic job on the production, the quality, the components, the artwork, just overall high praise for Elf Creek Games for the look and the presentation of Honey Buzz. Everything from the tiles to the different denominations of money being different shapes. And then, of course, you have the player boards, those the thick reference boards, and each of the player boards of all the 4 colors, which I have to say I like the color scheme in this. You got the kind of pastel colors, but each of the player boards are all different artwork. So I think that's a really cool thing that Elf Creek Games did. The artwork of all the critters look just, they look adorable, and why wouldn't, bears want to go to the market and pick up honey? Because it just makes sense. And then, of course, speaking of honey, the biggest thing are the components of the honey. Those little squishy, gummy-looking components, they look absolutely fantastic. And every time I played this with new players, they just gravitate towards them, and they just look at them, and it's just, they're tactile. They're so fun to build or produce and put on your hive, and just overall components for Honey Buzz, top notch. This game looks pretty simple. When I got this game, I was like, man, this is pretty easy. Put all the tiles out, put a worker here, grab a hex, make a hive, activate, move on. But man, there's a lot to think about on each turn. How you set your hive up is crucial. The wildflower honey takes only 3 tiles, and then cherry blossom and wildflower, they take 4, and acacia takes 5. And it's so hard to sometimes convince yourself to actually make that acacia one, because it takes that many more turns. And depending on how many beeples you have, when you bring them all back, that's a whole turn. So you have to really be careful on how you position these tiles. And then with the Queen's Contest, some of them I didn't show you in the overview, but some of them give you victory points for the most empty cells. So then you got to decide, are you going to fill all the cells with nectar tiles, or are you going to leave some open so that you can gain those 20 victory points if you come in first? And speaking more to those Queen's Contests, in a 2-player game, they are absolutely vital. You almost have to win 2 to win the game, because in a higher player count, if you get second in one of those, you still get something. But in the 2-player count, it's first place gets 20, second place gets nothing. So you almost have to work around knowing that you're going to win at least one, if not winning 2 of those. Many of the games I've played is with just 2 players, and it seems as if the player that wins 2 of those more often than not does win the game in general. So those Queens contests, I love them. They kind of give you a little bit of direction. There's a variety of them. You only saw 3 in the overview, but there's one also for first player to get 10 Bs. So then you're working quickly in those speed ones to fill those as quick as you can. And I have to say, you need the workers in this game. So that Queen's contest for the fewest workers, that's a little bit of a tightrope, because you don't want to have too few, but at the same time, you don't want to have the most. You know what I mean? So I know those Queen contests, I really do enjoy those. I love the whole aspect of building your hive. It's puzzly, it's thinky. Each time you put a worker out, you grab the tile that you need. You really got to think where you're going to put it. Not just necessarily as to what kind of honey you want to build or what kind of empty cell you want to create, but just in general of, you can only activate each of the actions once per turn unless you have that decree tile. Then you can do one of them twice. But just how you're going to build that hive. And I just love the puzzly aspect of this game. Overall, this game is just an absolute gem. For the price that I paid, man, you get an absolute boatload of game in this game. I showed in the overview the original setup. That's like kind of the base setup, but there's like something like 20 different configurations to start each game. And then one player picks one of those cards, and then they set up their hive as it shows in the configuration that it shows, and then everybody has to mimic that. So there's just so much to think about when you play this game. I also know that the back side of the board, there's a variant, and I believe it's the original way to play the game. That forage section isn't set up in a grid like you saw in the overview, but rather it's set up in 4 quadrants, and all those nectar tiles are flipped upside down. So then there's a deduction aspect. Every time you forage, you secretly look at one of those tiles, and if you can put it into your hive, then you do. If not, you put it face down, and then you got to remember where that tile is. So that's just another level, and I haven't played that variant. To be honest, I'm intrigued, but I think it just adds another level. Like I said, it looks like a light game, but the first time you play, man, you really got to think. I remember the first play with my wife and I. There was a lot of thinking and a lot of head scratching of like, what exactly do I do here, and how do I progress and things like that. But as you play this game and just get familiar with the mechanics, I think it just opens up, and it becomes just a great puzzly game. I think on the box it says 90 minutes for a 4-player, which it could stretch up. I haven't played the 4-player count. Most of them have been 2 and 3, and I've played the solo, which is all right. I'm not a big solo gamer myself, but it has the option to play solo mode. So overall, Honey Buzz, an absolute gem of a game. It really is that good of a game. It's been getting a lot of buzz, and rightly so. It's great worker placement. It's a great economic. I love, do you get those orders to get that additional action, or do you just sell straight to the market? Because oftentimes, well, for sure at the beginning of the game, selling your honey is worth more than those orders. But then you got to weigh the balance of, is the additional action making up for what it's what you're not gaining from victory points from filling the order, if that makes sense. But overall, check out Honey Buzz. It really is that good of a game. I'm giving this one a solid 85% Chance of Meeples. Like, I really, really enjoy this game. I know there's a mini expansion. I haven't got my hands on that one. I would love to do that, and I've heard that there potentially could be even more content down the road for Honey Buzz. So 85% Chance of Meeples. Check it out. My name is Brent. Check us out on Facebook. Cloudy with a Chance of Meeples. Remember, grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with a chance of meeples.